Welcome everyone to a new edition of Human Dialogues. I'm Jessica Lockhart, and I'm really thrilled to be here with you one more month to discuss a human topic. As you know, the International Institute of Humanology organizes these events once a month, these human dialogues, to approach and discuss a human topic with a human being, with an expert, or somebody who has the knowledge, the experience, the wisdom to contribute some ideas and insights that might inspire you or even lead you to questioning the issue and asking yourself more questions. The topic that we're working on this month at the Institute is none other than circumstances. And as you may imagine, that could mean almost anything. But the approach we're going to have today with our special guest is going to be quite humanological in a sense, because we at the Institute in Humanology always say that we are not our circumstances. So the title for today's show is I Am Not My Circumstances. Are you? To discuss this very, very interesting question, we're going to have none other than Sima Lieberman, who calls herself the inclusionist. She is the winner of the Global Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Award from the Human Resource Development Council in Mumbai, author of 3 books on diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a global consultant, speaker, and facilitator, Sim has been helping leaders in organizations create inclusive workplaces for over 30 years. She's also the host of the podcast Everyday Conversations on Race for Everyday People, a cross-race conversation on race, and she's been featured in numerous publications, podcasts, and media across the globe. As you can see, we have a wonderful interviewee today, a very special person who's going for sure to give us some insights and a new perspective on circumstances. Sima, what an honor to have you here with me tonight. I'm thrilled. How are you?
I'm good, but it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be with you. I was so thrilled when you contacted me to ask me to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. I think it's important that we somehow tell our audience how we met, because those were some unique circumstances. Talking about circumstances, right? We were both in India at the time because we were both receiving awards. Sima, do you want to tell the story? It was really unique and fun.
Well, it was amazing that we were in Mumbai we attended the Human Resource Development Conference, and we were both there to win awards, and we just ended up talking to each other. I stayed for much longer, but the 4 days of the conference was amazing, and I miss people like you, which was to me such a special gift.
Yeah, and I remember we organized a group that we called ourselves the happyologists, because I do humanology and I'm the humanologist, and I was talking about how important it is to be happy that we decided to call ourselves the happyologists. And that's how we created this really fun vibe, and we really had a good time, didn't we?
We did. I remember we went walking by the water. That was that was so great.
That was fantastic. So Sima, we're talking about circumstances. And I think that in today's world, and given some very recent happenings in the world, from COVID times to what's going on in the world today with the war in Ukraine, with everything, the recent earthquake in Morocco, these terrible things that are happening, happier things as well. Well, a lot of people feel like they're victims of their circumstances. But we usually explain in humanology that circumstances happen out there in the world, but we are not them. We are ourselves. What's your take on this statement?
Well, things do happen around us, and there are things in life that we have no control over. At the same time, we have control over ourselves, our reactions, our thoughts. And it's not easy. I don't want to say that it's easy, because we have people here, at least in the US, who will say, oh, no, just give it up. It has nothing to do with you. Just let it go. But for me, that's almost impossible. We're impacted by our environment. We're impacted by what we read. And especially now with social media, we are impacted. And I'm going to tell you right now, some days it gets to me. Some days I start getting depressed, and I say, okay, what do I control here? I can control the fact that, number one, I don't have to be on social media 24 hours a day. I don't have to read everything, because then I'm just outwardly focused. And I think, what can I do for myself to feel better? And what actions can I take in my life to make myself feel better? Mm-hmm. You know, I learned that a long time ago, because I grew up in New York, in a lower income part of New York. My family didn't have a lot of money, and I blamed, and I became a drug addict, and now drug addiction is so prevalent because I think of everything that's going on. People are looking for ways to escape. And for me, I blamed the external circumstances. I blamed inequality. I blamed wherever there was a reason to blame, I blamed. And I wasn't thinking about the fact that there were other people who were in similar situations, who were in much worse situations, and they weren't drug addicts. They were dealing with life differently. And so we call it being clean and sober here in the US and other parts of the world too, in recovery for 39 years. And what I have learned is that, one, don't blame other people for what I'm doing in my life, and that I have control over my actions, and I can control my thoughts, so that I don't have to become my circumstances. And I'm not saying it's the easiest thing. It's not. But if we're talking about humanology, we're really talking about, how do we get the support that we need from other humans? And how do we learn the skills to be able to support what we need for ourselves?
Yeah, and with the story you just shared with us, thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, do you think that education, the way we're raised, the skills our parents try to convey and teach us, has a very significant impact upon the way in which we live or we experience the circumstances around us? Let me rephrase the question. Can we be better trained to deal with our circumstances?
Well, absolutely. I mean, somebody trained me. I had to get trained. And actually, I got certified in the early days. I got certified. I'm actually a certified stress management consultant, because I was so stressed. And it's the stress really that gets to us about situations we have no control over. And what that does is it impacts our daily lives. So we don't really get to be our best, because we're just so focused on what's happening outside. And people can teach their children those skills. I mean, I've tried to teach my son those skills. And we're impacted by our environment. We're impacted by the messages that we receive, because my work the work that I do is around also diversity and inclusion. And we talk about bias, and we talk about the fact that we are impacted. But if we learn the right skills, we can change that impact. And so education is important.
And do you think it could also extend to schools? Do you think that schools could perhaps also help future generations be better prepared, better equipped to deal with circumstances?
Oh, absolutely. Where my son went to school, I mean, he's 29 now, but we live in Berkeley, California. And for a lot of people don't know where Berkeley is. It's actually, it's progressive in many ways. And when it comes to education, so they taught, like, well, I guess you would call it self-soothing, or how to manage stress. They taught the kids how to do deep breathing. They taught the kids how to actually be critical thinkers. Now, I can't say, now I'm only in the United States, and I cannot say that that's true for all of the country, because there's some places in the US when you start talking about breathing and meditation, they're freaked out. They think, oh, that's horrible. You're brainwashing people. So the education system here it really depends on where you live. And I could say that the education system could have a major impact, but it could also have an impact in the negative too. And we have that happening here too.
Did you see that it helped your son, for example?
Yes, it did, because my partner died when my son was 7, and I ended up having to raise him. Well, I say I raised him by myself, but the reality is that, they say it takes a village to raise a child. The reality is that I had a village. I had created a community. And so that community helped my son.
Wow.
And they would sit with him and talk with him and teach him skills also.
Wow. That's part of what we were talking about, those skills that people transfer, teach, share, and that kids acquire. And those are the skills that will help them in the future. But one more thing that we say in Humanology is that in many of the cultures in the world today, children are taught to worry. We're told that we should be ready for the worst. That if we worry and plan ahead and really consider all the possible negative scenarios, we'll be ready for whatever comes to us. And I think that COVID proved us wrong. Worrying for hours every day didn't get anybody better prepared, better equipped to deal with COVID. And I think that on the contrary, when you overthink, when you over-ruminate, when you over-prepare and over-plan, at the end of the day, you're less equipped to deal with the circumstances that might surprise you because you were too busy thinking instead of actually doing things.
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say that I think you're right. And at the same time, it's good to teach people how to be prepared. Now, I grew up in a worry culture. I grew up in an immigrant culture from Eastern Europe, and our neighborhood with a lot of immigrants, and people had been, and we're Jewish, and a lot of people had been in the Holocaust. So we had people who had been in the concentration camps. And so they talk about generational trauma, and we had that generational trauma of stress and worry, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And so even though like my parents tried to instill, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, I didn't feel like it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Because you could tell people don't worry, but you also have to teach them some skills. And I read a book several years ago. I think it was called like The Power of Negative Thinking, or The Positive Power of, it was something like that. But what they talked about, they said that people need to learn how to not only think about, oh, everything's going to work, because what happens when it doesn't work? Then people are devastated. But they said, but it's about learning, if it doesn't work, then this is what I'm going to do. So that way you do feel more prepared, and you do feel less afraid, and you do feel more confident. So, but to spend all that time worrying, and I've done that myself. There are times when I'll start worrying about things, and it's a waste of time, because I say, well, I could be stressed in this situation or not stressed in this situation. The situation is going to stay the same, but if I'm not stressed, I can figure out a way to then deal with it. But when I'm stressed, I can't think. When I'm worried, I can't think. I just live in fear.
That's exactly it. See, when you don't worry at all and you're only in la la land all the time, la 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 la, thinking about what could go wrong, that's just wishful thinking. What we usually explain to our clients here at the Institute is that you should worry enough to be a little prepared, but you shouldn't let worry control you or govern you. You have to be in control at all times. And that should strike a balance, a positive balance. We said that you're an expert in inclusion. Would you say that there's a difference in the way that people handle or face their circumstances based on ethnicity, religion, sex, sexual orientation? Or do you think that we're just all uniquely human beings? Do you think that culture plays a role? What do you believe?
Well, we are uniquely human beings. That's true. At the same time, culture and experiences play a role. Growing up Jewish in the United States or in Eastern Europe, you grew up, a lot of us grew up with that worry and that fear, where somebody who had not been through that would not have that fear. There's a book called My Grandmother's Hands, and it's a book about generational trauma. It's written by a Black man, and he talked about generational trauma of African Americans. And he talked about generational trauma of white people who like have history of oppressing Black people. But what he did say, he said that the three groups now this is in the United States, so it's different, obviously, in different countries, that the three groups who have the most generational trauma in the US are Native Americans, Jewish people, and Black people because of genocide. So you deal with things differently. I mean, if you're a Black person, chances are that you're more in tune to see that something is racist, and it's the same for every group. And when we talk about trauma, I mean, I think who could be more. The Middle East, people in the Middle East live with so much trauma.
So what do you think could be a way to breach that gap? Because the way I understand what you just said is, yes, each group or each subculture deals with their circumstances their own unique way. How could we somehow learn ones from the others? How could we take advantage of what some of us are doing well and learn what we're doing wrong? How could that inclusion help us grow as humankind?
Well, I think people need to get to know each other. And oftentimes people only know people who are just like them. And the other thing too is, like, you could have a similar circumstance. Like, for instance, growing up where I grew up, early on, it was a mostly Jewish neighborhood, and then it wasn't. But with that trauma, it made a lot of people only want to be around Jewish people. Like, there's a lot of Black people in the United States that only want to be around Black people because it's safety. But for me, I decided in an early age, this is how I got into inclusion, was that I would feel safest and I would be best if I'm around people from different cultures, people who had also had to deal with issues around prejudice and discrimination. And so I dealt with it differently. So different people deal with it differently, but it still impacts. I mean, like, I went on to do like Palestinian Jewish dialogues because that was really important. And some people would be afraid to do something like that. But I think we need to learn from each other. We do need to talk with each other. And there are some things that are true for everybody, of like, how do you let go of things that you can't control? How do you do that? Or when we talk about inclusion, how do you make people feel included? Because, when people feel included, they feel safe. When people feel safe, they can do their best work. And that's on a human level. When you get to know people who are different than you and understand them and they understand you, then you could support each other. And I think ultimately, a lot of it comes down to people not being isolated and being able to support each other. So when that happens and you feel safer, we talk about psychological safety, then you're part of a community, whatever that community is, and you worry less because it's not only up to you. Because when we think that it's only up to us, that's when it's really scary. Who's going to be there? Who's going to help me? What happened? What if? And that's terrifying. And for some people, and some people have seen the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah, it's funny because we always say that what if is the question of fear in human beings. And when we start asking ourselves, what if, we're creating fear in ourselves. So you have worked with people from many different cultures and many different environments and backgrounds. Have you somehow discovered some kind of tool, technique, strategy that could help us, that we should all learn, and that could be something to use in case of difficult circumstances? Anything you would recommend our watchers?
Curiosity.
Aha.
Be interested. Be real curiosity about other people. Be interested in other people. Sometimes people think that they're being curious, but they're really just working out their assumptions, or they're just being, they want to condemn. They have an assumption, so that they ask questions, and the way that they ask it is almost aggressive. But be curious, want to know, because when you're curious, that's how you get more information. And the more information we have, the less frightened people are. Mm-hmm. And the more information we have about other people, the less people are afraid of each other. Because when people are afraid of each other, and when they don't see each other as real human beings, that's when they hate each other. Mm-hmm. And that's when you have wars, and that's when you have people killing each other because they're no longer human.
Yeah. They see
so humanology, it's about the humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we've been talking about your past, a difficult one with specific circumstances. Is there one strategy that helped you? You say curiosity is good in general, but is there maybe an anecdote, maybe a story you want to share with our viewers that could inspire them in difficult circumstances? And let me add something. Usually people feel lost or overwhelmed by their circumstances when the circumstances entail change. A lot of people are terrified by change, and they feel like they lose their footing or their foothold when circumstances are hard, because there's a lot of change. So in times of change, have you ever had any experiences or strategies that could help?
I've had many.
Would you like to share some?
I've had issues with people being victims of violence. I've had issues with illness. I've had issues around being a drug addict, and issues around business, issues around work. You know, I'm a consultant, and there are times when I start worrying, what's going to happen? Oh, if I don't get this contract, if I don't get this work, what's going to happen? And so what I have had to do is I have to ask myself, what's real? I know for many people, people have issues around finances. And we start thinking about, well, what's going to happen 6 months from now? Am I going to lose everything that I have? Am I going to be out on the street? People probably are very surprised, but in the United States, we have homelessness is an epidemic. We have so many homeless people. So a lot of times people say, oh, I'm going to end up being homeless. So for me, I mean, there was a time in my life, I was really afraid. I thought, oh, I'm just starting out. I am having a hard time finding work. And I immediately said, I'm going to be homeless. And somebody said, well, why don't you do this chart? And the chart was, what is your situation? My situation was that I wasn't working, that I was getting into debt. And she said, but what is it that you know for sure? Are you homeless today? And I said, no. Are you close to homeless? No, but what's your fear? So I had to, write down all of your fears. Write down, what are you afraid of? And also, what is absolutely true? And then, what is the problem? And who can you go to for support? And what can you do? And breaking it down like that makes a difference, because there are times, even now, I mean, even in my life, even in my business life, there are times when I get worried, oh, what's going to happen? You know, like in the United States, it was for a while during the last administration, government agencies weren't allowed to hire anybody that talked about diversity. And even now there's like this movement of don't hire people who talk about diversity. It's horrible. And a lot of us we're getting scared. And I thought, well, what do I know for sure? I know for sure that I'm still getting work. Diversity is still really important. Inclusion is really important. It's really important in how people do business. So what do I need to do? What I don't need to do is try to get work in areas where talking about diversity is illegal. Uh-huh. So what I need to do is talk to the people that see the value, and also show people the value, but also talk to other people. And I think that that's really key, is to not try to do everything alone. In the United States, and I know in other countries, there are people who, oh yeah, we're individuals, we got to do it by ourselves. Who said? And a lot of times when people say they're going to do something by themselves, they pick that up from other people in this country that say that. And a lot of those people who say that are very wealthy people. So they could just pay anybody to do anything. But for the rest of us, we have to rely on other people. And you know what? When you ask somebody for help, when people ask me for help, I'm honored. And I'm more likely then to also ask them for help. Because I look at collective societies where people are much happier because they know that they're not going to be alone, because the fear is being alone and having to deal with all the challenges by yourself. But when you feel like you're not by yourself, and I write down, sometimes I write, okay, I have this problem, and I write down, who can I talk to? I mean, you have to decide who you're not going to talk to everybody in the whole world, because they might give you stupid information or really horrible advice, because they might be real negative people. But who can I talk to? Who can help me if I talk to them? And that helps me. I mean, because these are very stressful times for a lot of us.
Yeah, it's funny because you said three things that could be summarized as the three C's: curiosity, connection, and communication. That could be three keys to helping yourself when you're in times of need, when the circumstances get really hard. Sometimes we feel like we're victims of our circumstances. We feel completely helpless and like there's nothing we can do. What would you tell people who feel like that? Do you think there's really any time in which we're so helpless?
Well, I've been there.
Okay.
You know, I've been a victim where everything was everybody else's fault. And I really feel like I am a victim. And what I learned through the years, and now I don't see myself as a victim. I mean, it's what you could be victimized. I mean, like for a woman, if a woman gets attacked, she's victimized. I mean, she's a victim in that particular situation.
Yep.
You know, if I am the victim of a crime, I'm the victim of that crime. But we're talking about, I think, a mindset of victimhood. And I used to have that mindset of victimhood. So when you have the mindset of victimhood, you feel like there's nothing I can do. It's horrible. And when everybody says, how are you doing? Oh, this, oh, that, oh, this, oh, that. Because I see myself as a victim. So we can actually change that mindset. And what I mean by that is you look at, what do I have the power to do? And break it up, because when you see yourself as a victim, every situation you're seeing yourself as a victim. But what about the situations where you're not a victim? What about the situations where you do have control? What about the situations where you are happy? But when you get that victim mindset, it's kind of like a cloak of victimology that goes over you. And then as a result, it stops you from having empathy. It stops you from having empathy for people who are in wars, who are being bombed, who are being victimized by other people, because you're only focused on yourself. Like, get out of yourself. Sometimes when I'm feeling like, oh, poor me, I say, okay, I'm going to make somebody else's life better today. What can I do? Because I know that the victimology can come back, but I have the power to stop that. And we all do. Because when we see ourselves as victims, we use it as a justification to not care about other people. We use it as a justification to not take action. And sometimes we use it as a justification to be mean to other people.
Wow.
And to not spread love. And it's about love, because when you come from, for me, when you come from a place of love, then it's easier to take action. And you want to make sure that you surround yourself with people who do love you. Don't surround yourself with people who are the same. I mean, when I was into my victim thing, when I was like in the throes of drug addiction, I was only around other victims. And all we did was sit around and complain and feel sad and feel sorry for ourselves. And what that did was it stopped us from having feelings for people who really were in bad situations that they had gotten into for whatever reason. And it stopped us from helping people. And I mean, I had somebody call me up and they were telling me they wanted my help. And they said, yeah, but it all started when I was 5 and this happened and that happened and this happened and that happened. And I said, look, I spent a lot of time in my life being a victim. And I said, I spent too much time on my victim and being a victim to want to hang out with other victims. I said, so if you want to talk about what you can do, I am so glad to help you. I said, but if you choose to stay where you are, that's cool. But I can't help you, because also there are times, like I said, there are times when things happen to us. And that's when we need to, we have to allow ourselves to feel bad. We have to allow ourselves to feel sad. But at the same time, we also have to look for the moments of joy. And we have to say, I'm feeling this way because of this situation. But overall, this is not my situation. This is something that is happening to me right now. Even like grief. You have to grieve. I've seen people say, oh, well, I don't really believe in grieving. I said, okay, then you're probably going to get sick.
Yeah.
Like when my partner died, I allowed myself to grieve and I felt horrible. But by knowing that I wasn't always going to feel that way, allowed me to really live in my grief, because I knew it wasn't permanent. I knew that there was some rays of hope in different places, and I needed to find those rays.
Wow, what a powerful message. Thank you so much, Seema, for these ideas and for this understanding. There's something that I want to go back to, though. You were saying that victimhood somehow helps you focus just on the negative. And I was therefore coming to the conclusion that perhaps victimhood, therefore, when you're in the victim seat, no inclusion is possible, because you're always turning everything, you're like painting everything black, and you cannot see other people, you cannot accept other people, you can just interact with those who are black like you, not in the skin color, but in the situation. And then inclusion cannot exist when you consider yourself a victim of circumstances, right?
No, it's like a cloud. I mean, I wouldn't call it a cloud, but it's like a cloud, and you can't get out of that cloud, and you don't want to get out of the cloud, because there's also a fear. Because sometimes I remember, for me, holding on to victimhood, because what was the alternative? The alternative was then I would have to make some decisions, and I would have to take some actions that were very scary for me. So I had to hold on to it.
That's important. When people feel overwhelmed by their circumstances and victims of their circumstances, they become paralyzed and they stop acting. They lay back and watch things unfold, not actually doing anything to change their circumstances. Is that right?
Yeah, I've done that. I mean, sometimes I'll still find myself doing that. And then I just have to stop. I say, wait a minute, what am I doing? What can I do to get out of this situation? I mean, and sometimes it's living in a situation for a while and knowing that it's not going to be permanent, but asking yourself, what steps can I take? If I take one step, then I take another step, because I could tell you that I used to really see myself as a victim. And as a result of that, I missed out on so many opportunities. Because what's the use? What's the point? This won't work. And and something as I've gotten older, I think about it. I think, I missed out on those opportunities because I was afraid, and it was easier for me to stay stuck in, everything's so hard for me.
If you see someone acting like that, being a victim, is there any way to help those people?
Because you could ask them if they want help.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Sometimes they don't want any help. So, I have parents come to me and tell me, yeah, because my son, my daughter, they don't want to do anything to change their circumstances, but we still want to help them.
That's a tough one. I actually have a friend that's going through that now. And I said, well, maybe they won't listen to you, but is there someone that they will listen to? Is there another adult? Is there a friend that you know? Because I know for my son, there were times when he wouldn't listen to me, and he was like in such a, like, oh mom, blah blah blah, and I would get so frustrated. Hey, I can help you, let me help you. He didn't want help from his mother.
Yeah.
So I talked to other people who had more of an influence on him. Now, they said the same exact thing that I would have said, but he listened to them.
Yeah.
I just think of some of those times when he would listen to other people. Now, some people have such big egos, like some parents have egos. And people say, well, how come he would listen to me, but he listened to them? And I said, because that's just how it is. When you were growing up, did you listen more to your parents, or did you listen to
Your friends.
other people? Yeah, your friends or other adults, who they might have said the same thing. But I'm not going to listen to my parents at that time. So it's knowing what your, knowing what your abilities to influence, and knowing that as a parent, oftentimes that's just how it is. The kids are not going to necessarily listen to you. I mean, sometimes they do. I mean, you do have to still instill trust, but it's finding other people who can tell your kids the same thing.
So once again, communication, connection, and curiosity. At the end
and I also believe in counseling. I also believe in the right therapy, the right counseling.
See, 4 C's. I love it.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's funny. We just came up with something beautiful, the 4 C's. Well, thank you very, very much, Sima, for these minutes of conversation, of human dialogue. I found them really enlightening and interesting. I'm sure there's people saying hello from Barcelona, by the way.
Hola.
Hola. I know, because we had to change the hour last minute, that there will be other people watching the show as well and maybe posing questions. We will refer them to you. We'll send you the questions if they make any comments or they ask any questions. I'm sure this will be the first of many, Sima. I know you have a lot to contribute. I know you have, as we just saw, a very deep, wide, and expansive life experience that people can learn from, for sure. So I'd be very happy to have you back on our shows in the future to discuss more human topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would love to be back. Thank you.
We will make it happen then. Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. This was Human Dialogues. As you know, we are coming back next month with another topic that's going to be, whoa, that's an important one. Let me find it. Let me not make a mistake. Forgiveness. Next month, we're talking about forgiveness. Don't miss Human Conversations and Human Dialogues on the topic of forgiveness. I'm Jessica Lockhart. This is the International Institute of Humanology. See you soon.